Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tragically and totally unnecessarily, what we are seeing in real time is an assault on the veterans of America. It's an assault that is part of a campaign by Elon Musk, who's been empowered by President Trump supposedly to eliminate waste in our federal government. Instead of eliminating waste, Elon Musk is laying waste to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And it is unfolding in real time with real-life impacts on our veterans. Not only is he firing veterans at the VA, many of the 2,400 already terminated are veterans, 1/3 of them, but across agencies in the United States government, where 30,000 members of the federal workforce have been indiscriminately terminated. 30% of them are veterans as well. Almost 50% of everybody in the Department of Defense who has been fired, they're veterans. And they may be probationary employees, promoted to a position where they are in probationary status because they've done such a great job. They're being fired. Younger members of the federal workforce, there for up to 2 years. The future of our civil service, they're fired. And so many of them are veterans who have worn the uniform, served and sacrificed, and want to continue to benefit the country with the skills and dedication that they've demonstrated as members of our United States Armed Forces. Public service has long been a preferred path for military-affiliated populations, whether it's in our local police force or as emergency medical personnel. Joining the federal workforce has enabled them to continue serving our country while offering competitive wages, benefits, and much-needed stability for them as veterans, and tremendous benefits for taxpayers. And now, what Elon Musk is doing, relying on his tech bros and his algorithms and his AI formulas, is to cut across the board, leaving those veterans as disposable trash or roadkill in his campaign to eliminate waste. Well, let me tell you, Elon Musk, if you were serious about eliminating waste, you wouldn't have fired the inspectors general of these agencies, who are the watchdogs. They have records of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. Exhibit A, Michael Missel, the Inspector General of the VA, hired and appointed first by President Obama. He served under President Trump for 4 years, then under President Biden. He has ruffled feathers of Republican and Democratic administrations because he's uncovered waste and fraud in a very bipartisan way, and he regards his job as bipartisan. He would be the one to eliminate waste, not with a meat axe, but with a scalpel. I wish my colleagues had been in the hearing today, joint hearing of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, to hear Commander Al Lippert of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, a really heroic Vietnam veteran, injured there, shrapnel in his arm, and as he told us, the surgeon removed the shrapnel piece by piece, didn't cut off his arm. That's the approach that we need, as he said, in eliminating waste. Not cutting off arms or legs, but removing the waste carefully, deliberately, cautiously. Among the illegally terminated, and I should stress illegally terminated, 2,400 VA employees, many of them veterans themselves, members of the Guard or Reserves now, caregivers, military spouses. In the DOD, many of them, 45%, former veterans. And the overall impact will be disastrous on the 640,000 veterans who are public service. Musk and Trump have already upended the lives of so many. The thousands of veterans casually discarded, illegally fired without notice or justification, all for cheap headlines. The impacts in real life are undeniable, and stories from newspapers, from broadcast media, from all kinds of outlets tell the story of those real-life impacts. But I know my colleagues are hearing from their constituents about the mental health services that are delayed, about the surgeries that can't be provided, about the Veterans Crisis Line, serving veterans who may be taking their own lives, all reduced. These real-life impacts are undeniable, and we're talking about the people who make sure that veterans have transportation to those appointments, who assist with benefits claims, who ensure that the VA hospitals are maintained and that they are safe, who clean operating rooms and sterilize instruments in between procedures. It may not be the surgeon who's fired, but the surgeon walking into the operating room needs a staff and a team to assist him, needs the housekeeping staff to make sure that it's clean. These people have dedicated their careers to serving veterans and their nation, and all have been indiscriminately and illegally terminated. These short headlines tell a story, and so does this visual from Springfield, Massachusetts. Due to abrupt and unplanned staff shortages, we are not able to greet you at this time. If you have a scheduled appointment, your counselor will be out to get you in time of your appointment. You are here. If you are here for any other reason, please call and leave a message, and a staff member will return your call. We apologize. We apologize for any inconvenience and impact on your care. Donald Trump and Elon Musk owe veterans an apology. Right now, Elon Musk is giving veterans the middle finger. Veterans won't stand for it. And so, Mr. President, I am introducing a resolution today and asking that we approve it, to uphold the contract, to uphold the promise, to uphold the commitment we make to our veterans when they raise their right hand and promise to serve and sacrifice, even at the risk of dying. I'm joined by Senators Hirono, Slotkin, Lujan, Murray, Durbin, Whitehouse, Warnock, Klobuchar, Shaheen, Kane, Rosen, Cortez, Masto, also Brooks, Kelly, Warren, Hassan, Schiff, Baldwin, Duckworth, Gallego, Peters, Van Hollen, Sanders, Booker, Wyden, Merkley, Warner, Smith, Padilla, Heinrich, Schatz, and Hickenlooper in this effort. I really wish it were bipartisan, because veterans' issues have been bipartisan. I've worked with veterans, including the chairman, whom I respect, Senator Moran, on these issues. This resolution acknowledges that veterans who make up less than 7% of Americans, but approximately 30% of public service, have been really disrespected and disserved in just these weeks, with such destructive and repugnant effect on them, on veterans they serve, and on American values. Our nation and they deserve better. And so I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 105, which is at the desk. Further, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President,
The senator from Kansas.
reserving the right to object. In my conversations with Kansans, I frequently point to the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs as proof that we can still work together, that unity is attainable, and that we are able to set aside our partisan differences and frustrations to find a way to work together to put our nation's veterans first, because they did that for us when they put on the uniform and took a vow to defend and protect our country. The Senate has to work together with the administration, with the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, veteran service organizations, and the broad veteran community across the country. This resolution divides the Congress and the administration and makes it more difficult for us to find consensus. We should work together. We should work together to determine what is the right kind of workforce at the VA, a workforce that enables the department to better care for veterans. Approving this resolution drives a wedge between this body, this Senate, this Congress, and the executive branch, and I don't see how that helps veterans. Additionally, this resolution was designed to lock in at the VA the status quo as of January the 19th. I don't know if any of my colleagues believe that the VA was doing everything just right prior to this administration. I commit today to all my colleagues to work with them to make certain the VA retains an effective workforce that can deliver our promises to veterans. But we will only achieve that by working together and working with the Department of Veterans Affairs to find the desirable outcomes. We need more information, and we need to be working together to achieve that. Mr. President, therefore, I object.
The objection is heard. The senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, first let me say I am hopeful that we can work together. If the chairman of the VA committee is willing to do it, to try to arrive at language that calls for the rehiring of these veterans, rescinding the layoffs. And I must say, we're joined today by a number of guests of my colleagues, as well as myself, veterans who have been terminated. They're with us today. They're going to be with us tonight at the address offered by President Trump. I am more than happy to work on this resolution if there is a way to make it bipartisan. But the basic principle that we owe our veterans that contract and commitment, and that we need to bring them back so that these kinds of consequences can be avoided, I think is fundamental to the effort today. Because we know more than 50 patient appointments were canceled at a VA facility just this past week because they can't hire staff needed to care for those veterans. We know that in the first round of terminations, Secretary Collins terminated 9 Veterans Crisis Line employees, then he hired some back, then he fired more. And we know a pregnant spouse of a disabled veteran who was hired under the Military Spouse Appointing Authority was terminated. We know a 25-year Marine Corps veteran with a 100% service-connected disability rating and 15 years of service was terminated. We know a VA researcher working on treatments for substance use disorders among veterans was terminated. We know the cybersecurity lead for the VA website, the digital hub that connects veterans with their benefits and holds sensitive personal data, was terminated. These kinds of impacts, and I've mentioned just a tiny fraction of all of them, are ongoing, they're real, they're urgent. And I'm more than happy to work on the language of this resolution, but the goal is indisputable and unavoidable. I'm going to turn now to some of my colleagues who have joined me today. I thank them for doing so. First, Senator Whitehouse, if I may yield to him, Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
President, first let me thank Senator Blumenthal for this effort. It really matters. Even if it fails, it matters to our veterans to know that we tried, to know that we did not leave them out there at the mercy of Elon Musk and his little muskrats that have been running around through all of our government agencies, breaking agencies, violating court orders, prowling through your data, Americans, prowling through your data, and of course, firing veterans. No president has fired more veterans than Donald Trump just in his first few weeks in office. And what it is doing to the VA and to services for veterans is deeply wrong and deeply unfortunate. In Rhode Island, we have our Providence VA Health Center, which is a first-class operation. Our veterans love it. It is well run. It has all sorts of new services and facilities that Senator Reid and I have worked to make sure got to the hospital. It has nearly 2,500 employees. It's a big operation. And we also have the Providence VA Benefits Office, which is such a good benefits office that if a program is being rolled out and not working someplace, they call in the Providence Benefits Office to try to get it working. If they're about to roll out a new program and they want to beta test it, they go to the Providence Benefits Office because they're good at what they do. And I can't think of anything that makes them more proud than the customers whom they serve. They love the folks they work for. And so to go through this group and slash and burn without the least logic or care, from like these little tech bro muskrat types who've never served, have no idea what they're doing, but are just taking delight in moving fast and breaking things, to use the tech bro talk. Well, that's fine if you're a tech bro and you're just playing around with equipment, but when you're dealing with our veterans and we're dealing with people's lives, running around fast, not knowing what you're doing and breaking stuff sounds more like Thing 1 and Thing 2 from Cat in the Hat. This is not the responsible way in which veterans should be treated. I'll mention just two while I'm here. There's a Rhode Islander who works for our Veterans Crisis Line. It's the hotline that veterans can call into when they're having an acute crisis of some kind, perhaps even feeling suicidal. This is not easy work. When that phone goes, you've got to be on and you've got to be expert. You've got to understand how to support the people who are calling in. You've got to understand how to get them to the services they need. It is a life and death matter. And this individual was fired. And then rehired a few days later, or at least told they were reinstated just a few days later. But with all the scrambling going on at the VA has not reissued work credentials, and they still do not have a return to work date for the improper firing that never should have happened and then was rescinded, but now doesn't have a proper end to the termination. It is administrative malpractice, and it is stupid, and it is wrong. We've got another Rhode Islander who worked at the local vet center, also abruptly and unjustifiably terminated. Now, as I said, it really means a lot to these people to be working for veterans, and they really put their hearts into it, and they really want to do a very good job. And they actually get rated on whether or not They are, in fact, doing a good job. And this individual received outstanding performance ratings. It wasn't just that they threw their heart and soul into their work. Their peers reviewed them, their supervisors reviewed them, and said that they were outstanding performers at their work. And so a letter comes to them saying that they were terminated due to poor performance. Well, among other things, that was a lie, because they weren't poor performers. They were excellent performers. When you lie to people who are working for veterans just so you can fire them, that's a pretty loathsome way to go about serving veterans. And it's certainly a loathsome way to treat the people who dedicate their lives to taking care of veterans. If you want to go find the people who have poor performance and fire them, go find the people who have poor performance and fire them. But don't just random accuse high performers of poor performance, lie to them about their performance, and fire them. It is a really offensive state of affairs. And it means now that vet center calls are being routed out to Colorado in a different time zone. Rhode Island, a little bit like Connecticut, is a small state. Connecticut's a little bigger. And we have our own character, and we have our own nature, and we have our own often way of speaking. And it matters when you pick up the phone to call the vet center that you're not talking to somebody several time zones away in Colorado, particularly not because the phone isn't being answered because a high-performing worker was lied to about their performance and wrongly fired. There's really no excuse for that. So I want to say to the folks at the Providence Benefits Office, thank you, God bless you. We admire and respect what you do. We recognize that the entire VA organization has treated you as particularly expert and able, and the work that you do to make sure that our vets get the benefits that they're due is first class. Thank you for what you do. We are grateful, and I apologize that this president and this whatever he is and his little muskrats are doing this kind of damage to the institution that you so proudly serve. To the folks at the Providence VA Hospital, God bless you and thank you. You do great work. I deal with veterans all the time. Our veterans love our hospital. They're proud of our hospital. They think it's well run. They think they're well treated. The services are good. You can even get rides there. There's good parking. I mean, this hospital runs the way you would want a veterans hospital to run. So keep those little muskrats out of Rhode Island. Don't damage the services to our veterans. And I hope that, as the chairman said, we can come together and fix this. But it's hard to hear about how we should come together when nobody came together from Muskland, and those little muskrats didn't check in with anybody before they went in to break stuff at these agencies. It's a little late for togetherness when there's been none in terms of defending the work that these wonderful people do. With that, I'll yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from Connecticut.
we're going to be joined by others of my colleagues, but I want to follow Senator Whitehouse' very eloquent remarks by just making a couple of quick points. You know, tonight the President's going to speak to members of both the House and the Senate. And he's going to make a lot of claims, many of them untethered in any way to the facts. But if he does nothing else, what I'd like to see him do is show some respect for our veterans. He's called them suckers and losers. They've been called swamp creatures or deep staters by members of this administration. And part of the mindset here that's responsible for these firings is that disrespect for our veterans. Now, two of my sons are veterans, one a Marine Corps first lieutenant who served in Afghanistan, another a Navy SEAL. They value the VA. Americans see in their real lives how the VA helps our veterans. And when the President speaks tonight, I want him to look at the guests that we have brought. Not only my guest, Michael Missel, the former Inspector General of the VA, but also U.S. Air Force veteran with more than 30 years of military service, who retired from a lifetime of dedicated service to his country in November and immediately rededicated himself to serving his fellow veterans at the Department of Veterans Affairs. He started work on January 13th. He was legally terminated. Barely 1 month later, he's the sole winner of his family. And Tony Ruiz, a disabled Army veteran. Until he was illegally terminated, he worked at the VA Benefits Administration to assist veterans with their benefits claim. He was cut just 10 days before his probationary period ended. He was serving in his dream job. These veterans and other courageous former members of our armed forces are going to be with us tonight, and they will be speaking out. They will be sharing their stories. They are not faceless bureaucrats. They are not suckers. They're not losers. They're hardworking public servants who have willingly sacrificed everything for this country, willing to give even their lives, and now have rededicated themselves to continue their service now that their military time is complete. I want to yield to my colleague from Michigan, Senator Peters, who himself is a veteran and a great colleague and friend of ours.
The senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak in opposition to the mass termination of veterans that is taking place all across our federal government. I was proud to serve more than a decade in the U.S. Navy Reserve, where I rose to the rank of lieutenant commander. And during this time, I had the absolute privilege to work with some of the most patriotic, hardworking, and inspiring individuals that I have ever met. I know firsthand that veterans are a vital source of talent to our workforce. So let's just think for a moment. Let's just think about the qualities that make a valuable employee. Leadership, work ethic, problem-solving abilities, and of course, integrity. These are not just abstract qualities. They are tangible assets that veterans bring to our businesses, our communities, and to our government. They are qualities that drive innovation. They boost productivity and foster a culture of excellence. Employing our nation's veterans when they transition to civilian life is not just a responsibility, it is a smart business decision. And that's why the federal government has long taken advantage of this absolutely remarkable talent pool. Veterans now make up roughly 30% of our federal workforce, or more than 640,000 veterans in the civil service. And I rise today to express my absolute outrage over the indiscriminate firings of nearly 6,000 of these veterans, from the VA to the Defense Department to the Treasury Department. At the VA, where veterans' input is particularly critical to shaping policies that support our nation's robust veteran population, Elon Musk and DOGE have fired more than 600 veteran employees. They are part of more than 2,400 individuals fired all across the VA. I've heard from numerous veterans and VA workers in Michigan who are absolutely devastated and confused by why this administration would turn their back on them like this. My staff met with a veteran who has worked for the VA in Michigan for nearly 30 years. Last year, he was moved to a new role within the VA and was promoted to supervisor shortly thereafter. And no surprise, because he had never received less than an excellent performance review over 30 years. But because they were relatively new to that specific role, he was swept up in the widespread firings both within the VA and across government of all probationary employees. They were one of many veterans fired abruptly, without cause, without reason. In another case, a veteran with 8 years of active duty service in the Air Force was fired from the VA in Michigan after receiving an outstanding performance review. His probationary period was set to expire last week, just 12 days after he was let go. These cuts, Mr. President, are not based on fact. They're not based on logic. They are just cruel. And our country will not be better off. And as a result of these mass layoffs, Americans can expect longer wait times to receive important documents like passports and Social Security benefits, fewer food safety inspections, and higher risk during air travel. These are Americans who put their lives on the line to defend this country. They took up a job to continue to serve the people of this country. They represent the very best of our nation, and we need them in our federal workforce. And I'm calling today on the administration to reinstate these veteran employees immediately.